We here at the Sports History Network proudly partner with 26 podcasts, all revolving around the history of sports. But did you know that many of our hosts were sports history authors way before they started their shows? It's true. We've got Joe Ziemba, host of When Football Was Football, Joe Zagurski, host of Pro Football in the 1970s, Mark Morthier, host of Yesterday's Sports, Tommy Phillips, host of Lombardi Memories, and Scott Adamson, co-host of From the 55-Yard Line. All these authors have many books for you to choose from. To check them out, go to our website at sportshistorynetwork.com/sportshistorybooks. Pick up your copy today. Soundtrack provided by Kevin MacLeod of filmmusic.io.
This is Jeremy McFarland for the Football is Family podcast. There are certain events in your life when you can remember what you were doing, where you were, and what you were thinking when they took place. These events may only shape your life, but there are other events that can shape a nation. Over the past year, obviously, we've been in the middle of a pandemic, one that has tested all of us, one that has killed many, many people, and one that has caused us to treasure small moments, to treasure our family, and to treasure everyday life more than we ever did before. You would think that sports would be the furthest thing from our minds, but in reality, sports have helped us. Sports have allowed us to cheer, to get our minds off world events, and has allowed us to smile and hope once again. Sports truly have a healing effect on a nation in need of healing. Today, we're going to talk with our friend Clayton Truder. His events and knowledge of history come into play as we talk about how sports, the NFL specifically, have helped America recover from events like World War II, Desert Storm, 9/11, and the COVID crisis we are right in the middle of. I can't thank him enough for making this episode great. Please subscribe to this podcast and all the other great podcasts on the Sports History Network. And while you're at it, please give it a 5-star review on your podcast station of choice. And if you would like to be featured on this podcast, drop me a message on Twitter at Jeremy_McFarland or on the Football is Family Facebook page. I'd like to welcome you back to another episode of the Football is Family podcast. And I have a returning guest. Would you like to reintroduce yourself to everybody?
I certainly would, Jeremy. Thanks for having me. My name is Clayton Truder. I teach U.S. history at Norwich University in Northfield, Vermont. I hold a PhD in U.S. history from Boston College. I read about college basketball and college football for SB Nation's Down the Drive. It's their Cincinnati Bearcat, the Peach Bowl runner-up blog. I am the Vermont State Chairman of the Society for American Baseball Research, and I have a book coming out this fall about the history of professional sports in Atlanta.
And I am getting a signed copy. I'm just throwing that out to you, Clayton.
Oh, looking forward to sending you one.
Please do.
And coming back on the show to talk about it and promote it.
Oh, absolutely. We'll have you back on. I don't mind having guests on 3 or 4 times as long as they as long as they send me signed copies of books. I'm cool with it.
Oh, no doubt. And I'd like to plug my Twitter handle, which is at ClaytonTrutor.
I enjoy looking at your Twitter that you put up there, and every now and then I was like, what are you talking about? Oh, okay. See, you keep up with the finer details of sports that I don't always see, and that's what I appreciate about following your Twitter account.
Well, thank you. I mean, a lot of it's about sports history stuff, which is a big area of my interest and big area of my focus. So, yeah, I go off in a lot of directions. I appreciate you reading.
No, I keep up with it. I follow it every time it pops up. I have to give it a like because it just makes my day that much better, Clayton.
That's very kind of you to say. I don't think everybody feels that way about it, but
see, we only hear the negative in life, and life's too short. Life's too short. But kind of get to our topic. I was thinking, and you popped up in my head because I think you've helped me out with a couple books on not World War II, but the war. Let's try that again. The War That Made America. I believe you suggested that book to me,
Yep.
And I have read it 3 times now.
Wow.
It's a book over the 7 Years' War, but the war leading up to it, or the French and Indian War, which is fantastic. So you have led me in some directions. In fact, I'm reading it again. It's just fascinating. You learn new stuff as we go. And I was thinking about how can sports help us in times like this? And of course, this is 2021. I don't think COVID got the message that 2020 ended.
No.
And we are living in a world where I was watching the Titans game yesterday, and I scared my daughters when I was jumping up and down screaming at a kick, and they thought that I was crying, but I was just kind of excited. But we're living in a world where we have empty seats, and the Super Bowl is going to look really weird this year.
Oh my God, yeah.
We have cardboard cutouts in the seats. And I was thinking that this is not the only time where we can look back at sports and see how it has helped us through some hard times. So I have suggested about 4 different occasions, and we're going to talk. Well, let's go ahead and start with COVID. Again, this is 2021. If you are listening in a future world in 2020, 2019, out of China is pretty much where it's been tracked to. A disease and a virus came out that pretty much wiped over the world. It's killed thousands of people, made a lot of people that we know sick. It's very contagious. In fact, I'm reading as well, and I probably shouldn't have read this because it kind of makes you a little bit more concerned, but I'm reading a book over the 1919 pandemic of the Spanish flu.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very similar, not the same disease, but it's very similar in how they dealt with the Spanish flu and how we're dealing with COVID now. Mm-hmm. You wear the mask. That may or may not help. You wash your hands. For goodness sake, please wash your hands. But we're avoiding people in large groups of people in tight spaces. Social distancing, and I thought that was a new term. It wasn't. They were doing it back then. What do you think, Clayton? I guess what I'm trying to say is, what do you think, how has sports helped us through COVID?
Well, I think it's certainly provided a needed rhythm to people's lives, and certainly in my own experience, I can say this: that for months you just sort of felt like you were drifting. There weren't a lot of particular events to look forward to. People's working lives were very strange, myself included. Finally, when sports came back, particularly football, because it's my favorite sport, I had the weekly rhythm of following the New York Jets, my team, following college football, writing about college football. So to me, it has provided as much of a sense of normalcy as anything that's gone on. And I think back even in the flu epidemic, that's certainly true as well. I saw a number of pictures of college football fans in 1919 sitting with masks on in the stands watching games. So I think the people in that time period felt the exact same thing. I think in terms of having a sense of feeling normal, watching football, even though there's weird aspects to it with nobody in the crowd, with cardboard cutouts, with the piped-in sound, which I really hate. I still don't understand what the purpose of that is, why they're having pretend crowd noise. But nonetheless, when I'm watching a football game, I'm sitting around. I'm not a good person to watch a football game with. I'm sitting around watching it, pretending I'm the offensive coordinator and stuff. I'm very analytical about it. I don't say a lot. I'm just kind of watching very intently. I'm watching it no differently in 2020 than I was in 2019, 2018, 2002, whatever. So I think having a sense of just being, having one's normal rhythms of life has, to me, been the most important part of sports in these last few months, particularly since football season came around. And there's certainly been many challenges about it. Joe Judge, the Giants coach, spoke quite articulately about it earlier today, talking about how upset he was with what the Eagles were pulling last evening, that people put so much effort into this to get a season off, made so many sacrifices, that it was disgraceful to pull what they apparently pulled last evening. So I think all of the effort has proven very successful in simply having a season. To me, every single game that gets played every week was a victory in and of itself. If they complete a Super Bowl, even more of a victory for everybody, I think, even though it certainly feels strange, the whole thing.
It does feel strange. Come back, looking at it from here in Tennessee, the Titans were under about 2 weeks of quarantine. It went
Mm-hmm.
through that area like wildfire.
Mm-hmm.
And the NFL. I mean, how often do you see a Tuesday night game?
Oh my, yeah. I mean, in a strange way, as a fan, it was kind of nice having a game on Tuesday nights.
Was.
But at the same time, it's really weird. I mean, it throws your week off, kind of thing. To me, they play too many nights a week anyway, so it just kind of added more to that whole phenomenon that's been going on anyway. But yeah, it's been very strange. The degree of flexibility that teams showed in terms of rescheduling games and the league facilitating this struck me too. Guys frequently have sat around for 6 months thinking about a game, getting prepared for it. Then all of a sudden, 2 days later, they have an opponent they didn't expect. Even more so at the college level, where teams are calling athletic directors up, scheduling games, Coastal Carolina and BYU scheduling a game 48 hours later playing it. It's just such a strange phenomenon, and I've been impressed by the flexibility of so many people in football to make the game happen, whether it's at the college level, at the pro level. I haven't followed it around the country in the high school sense as much, but certainly I think that's been the case there as well.
My son's high school team, the Waverly Central High School Tigers, he plays in the band, but they didn't travel. The band didn't travel, and we had games where they had fans in the stands, and I was like, you know what, this kind of isn't a good thing.
Yeah.
But I basically stood off to the side because the last thing I want to get is COVID to give to my grandparents. I don't want that. But the one thing, when you think of, and the book is called The Great Influenza by John Barry. It's an amazing and scary book, but it opens your eyes to a lot of things. The thing about COVID that really got to me is how, like you said, how flexible things truly are, where you're saying, well, you know what? We may not know what's going to happen in 2 days.
Mm-hmm.
We might not know that, Denver Broncos had issues where they didn't have a quarterback.
Yeah.
And I believe his name was Hinton. I want to say that was his name. He did as admirable as you can.
Absolutely. I mean, it certainly made it hard. I didn't really have a rooting interest in that game. It made it hard not to root for that guy in that particular outcome when he's just out there playing off the street, essentially.
Well, that's one of the things that you can't really judge him for how bad it was, because he was put in a no-win situation.
Absolutely. As so many players have been this year. I mean, I feel like the Steelers had their games changed like 4 or 5 weeks in a row.
Yeah, that would be the Titans.
There's different things happening.
Yeah, that would be the Titans.
It was really crazy.
Well, what got me is Ben Roethlisberger was all mad about it, but guess what happened when the Steelers got COVID?
Exactly, yeah.
So I said, you got to be careful when you judge others, because it could happen to you pretty quickly.
Oh, no doubt about it. And certainly, as you're saying, it happened many times this season.
Absolutely. So you just have to be flexible about it. And you may be able to withstand it. The COVID virus can be, a lot of people have recovered from it, but you may not be the one that gets hurt by it. You might give it to somebody else. And that's the big thing. I'm sitting in my office here at the church I work at, and we spent 2 or 3 weeks where we didn't even meet. Mm-hmm. And then we met out in the parking lot where everybody stayed in the church, because we have, healthy people. And then we have people who were in their 70s that what happens if they got it? We didn't want to do that. So, but COVID is one of the things, and you're right, it's having normalcy, having something to look forward to. But let's go back in time to 19.
One other thing I wanted to say about COVID too that's always struck me throughout this. Frequently when there's a crisis, people want to find a way to pitch in and do something. What's so weird about this is basically you're being told to do nothing. That your way of helping out is basically sitting by yourself, doing nothing, avoiding people, which just goes against, I think, in many ways, the best impulses of people. I think most people want to have the opportunity to do something where they're helping, but really the only thing you can do to help is really not doing anything. So it's, I think, been very psychologically difficult in that respect for people.
It is. Maybe you've seen the meme, Clayton, where they has how people saved the world in 1940. They had them storming the beaches in Normandy.
Yeah.
And then today, how I'm saving the world is I'm playing Madden on the PlayStation.
I haven't seen that, but that's fantastic.
I'll have to send it to you when I find it. But it's true. It's true. And if you're like me, I've had to take a button or so off of my pants with all the vanilla wafers that I've been eating.
Oh, no doubt.
But hopefully, and we're doing this in January, the January 4th. hopefully by June or July we can get somewhat back to normal. Who knows?
Let's hope so. Let's certainly hope so.
But let's go back in time to 1991,
Mm-hmm.
and I was in fifth grade at this time. And I want to say this was the case that I didn't know where Kuwait was.
Oh, I don't think anybody did. I think foreign policy experts didn't. All of a sudden, it was a hot button issue, though.
It was. We have to save Kuwait. Now, if you don't know the situation behind this, in 1990, after about 8 or 9 years of war between Iran and Iraq, Saddam Hussein, who was the leader of Iraq, was desperate for money. He was broke. And when you're a dictator and you have no way to pay people to stay, so you can stay dictator, what do? Well, you kind of point your finger and said, you know what, we're going to go take that little country over called Kuwait and take their oil.
Mm-hmm.
And he did. And of course, the Americans and several other countries built up the armed forces in Saudi Arabia all around the place and called it Desert Shield. Well, I have the date here, and I can remember this like it was yesterday. January 17, 1991, Desert Storm took place. And if you ever watch some of the videos on YouTube, it is amazing what our boys and girls can do when they have a purpose in mind.
Oh, they took control of that pretty quickly. Absolutely. I was in fourth grade at the time, and I remember following it. I mean, my two interests were like the NFL and then the Gulf War, pretty much. I mean, so I was totally in the mindset. Those were the two things that I was following at that age.
Did you ever buy the Gulf War trading cards?
I have a binder of them.
See,
I'll tweet you a picture of them later today.
Do that. I can't remember where I had them. They may be long gone, but I had about 2 or 3 packs of them. And I thought they were pretty cool.
Absolutely. Well, here's the thing. Like by 93, they were really cheap, and at the Ben Franklin near my house, they were like 40 cents a pack or something of that.
Okay.
Again, like an upper deck pack of baseball cards was $2.50 or something. So I was loading up on the Gulf War cards.
Well, see that, and that's when they really introduced the B1. I believe it was the B1 that they introduced.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the F-117.
Mm-hmm.
And when they flew those stealth planes over Baghdad, you watch the anti-aircraft guns firing off, but they're not going to hit anything. They're already gone.
Yeah.
But how does this apply to sports? January the 25th, 1991, Super Bowl 25.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that was the Cowboys and Bills. I'm going to say
No, Bills, Giants.
Bills, Giants. Yes.
Yep.
The Cowboys, Bills would be later on. Okay, Bills, Giants. That game is memorable for a lot of reasons, but it started out with probably the greatest rendition of the national anthem of all time.
Oh, yeah, Whitney Houston's fantastic, certainly.
And, she walks out in a tracksuit, which is 1990 for you.
Indeed.
And you think, well, what is she going to do? I'm not a big Whitney Houston fan, but I give respect where respect is due. She brought the house down.
Oh, it was very emotional, very dramatic, and it was a moment when people were ready to respond to that as well, certainly.
You see, they had American flags around, and there's a close-up of an older man, and he probably served in World War II or Korea, and he is just bawling. And you think, well, men won't cry. You don't judge people. He probably has seen some things in his life.
Sure.
And how do you think the Super Bowl helped us during that time?
Well, I think it was you had these kind of two massive cultural events happening. You have the end of that football season, which was a great season too, because you would have had two teams 12-0, I think it was at one point, both the 49ers and Giants,
yes, battling
down in the NFC. You had the Bills team who looked like they themselves could be a dynasty. So you had a public very focused on this excellent football season with these two great teams, the Giants and Bills. Actually, it was the first time you had two teams from the same state in the Super Bowl against each other in Super Bowl 25. I mean, I guess the Giants are technically in New Jersey.
I wasn't going to bring that up, but
But basically two teams from the same state in the Super Bowl together, which added a layer of interest in that part of the country. At the same time, you have the Gulf War going on. So I think you have people strongly focused on this very serious news event, which was a unifying force in the culture. then at the same time you have this football game, which in many ways I think served to reinforce the sense of cultural unity that came out of that moment. So football strikes me as reinforcing the tendency towards social unity at that moment. At that moment, anyway, it turned out to be a rather brief war, but nobody knew that going in. My recollection at the time is people said, "Is this going to be another Vietnam? Are there going to be tens and thousands of American casualties?" It didn't turn out that way, but certainly nobody you couldn't have known that going in. And there were a lot of people who were very concerned.
A lot of people were concerned that Saddam was going to unleash chemical warfare. And, one thing that I appreciate about that particular Super Bowl is that football kept things in perspective. They realized that they are playing a game, but they respected the bigger picture. And we're going to look at that in just a second about another event that really hit home when it came to how events in the real world plays into sports. But I remember that game because of how patriotic things were and how we looked back and said, you know what, it's okay to be an American. We might be Giants fans, we might be Bills fans, but we were all in this together.
And it was just a fantastic game too. I believe it was the first one. It was a 1-point mark. It was 20-19. I think it was. You have, of course, the Norwood missed field goal. Both teams looked very strong coming out of that game. I mean, the whole narrative of the Bills losing all those Super Bowls in a row didn't exist then. I think people came out of that and thought this might be a team that could end up being a dynasty. I guess in a strange way they kind of are, having been to all those Super Bowls in a row. But the Bills were taken very seriously. There was none of the they're going to lose get pounded by the Cowboys and Redskins and stuff in the Super Bowl at that point. So it was a fantastic game too, which I think also added to the what a dramatic event it was too.
Now let's hop to another topic. Do you remember where you were on September 11th, 2001?
Absolutely. I was Actually, I was sitting in a college library reading my Middle Eastern history textbook.
You live a happy happening life there, my friend.
I leave the library and hold my textbook and go into class, and I had no idea what had happened until people around me started telling me. So that was my very very odd 9/11, I guess.
Do you have an emphasis on Middle East?
No, I just happened to be. I happened to be taking a class. It was something that had been of interest to me, and I was. I think I was a junior in college at the time, and it turned out to be a very opportune time to take the class.
Did that help you?
I mean, it just was happenstance, really.
Did that help you make sense of it a little bit more?
I think a little bit. It gave me a better sense of the region's history, certainly, if nothing else.
I was in my apartment in Warner Robins, Georgia. I just graduated college about 4 months earlier and moved down there. And I get a call, you need to see what's going on. And I turned on TV, and the first plane had hit the World Trade Center. And I thought, well, what's going on here? And then all of a sudden you see the second plane hit. In case you're not knowing, in 9/11, 2001, some planes hijacked by terrorists hit the World Trade Center, hit the Pentagon, and crash landed in a field in Pennsylvania. And this is probably, in our lifetime, yours and mine, Clayton, this is probably the defining moment in history for us.
Oh, no doubt about it. I mean, there was nothing. It seemed like a really bad movie was happening in real life. Certainly, I think there's been nothing like it before or since in my lifetime.
So, I was going through the NFL Century by Joe Horrigan again today, looking at how Paul Tagliabue, who was the NFL commissioner at the time, dealt with it. And I thought I would share it with you because it was fascinating. And I didn't know this until I got through Michael McCambridge's book on the America's Game. He actually worked in the Pentagon.
I didn't realize that.
I didn't either. And taking that, he dealt with probably very similar to how you deal with things when it comes to analytical thinking with your football, but also with history. He knew that something big is going to happen because of this. So what happened is he is talking to somebody about, he's on the phone with somebody, and one of his assistants come in and said a plane hit the World Trade Center. So they turn on the TV and look, it's just down the street from them, really.
Yeah.
And so he ended up calling Gene Upshaw. My mind went blank. Yeah, it was Gene Upshaw. They called him.
The NFLPA president at the time.
Yes. Yeah, the NFLPA. And he was down in Washington. And he drives by and he sees the Pentagon on fire.
Wow.
And you're just like, wow, how is this the case? But the bad thing is the NFL had two people, two relatives of workers, a husband and wife, basically, who died in the destruction of the World Trade Center. You're looking at.
I know about Rick Pitino's brother-in-law, who was his best friend, I believe, got killed in it as well.
That I didn't know.
Yeah, because I think he wrote a book about that, about his brother-in-law, I believe. Maybe I'm remembering that incorrectly, but I think a number of years ago he did.
Oh my goodness! Oh, how many died in that? Was it around 3,000?
3,000 something. Yeah, that's always the number that pops into my head.
And that's not just counting the World Trade Center; that's counting the Pentagon and.
I think that's the whole shebang.
But what happened is Paul Tagliabue said, you know what, we're going to reschedule the games.
Mm-hmm.
And part of why he did that was back in 1963, when Kennedy was shot, the commissioner at that time did not cancel the games, and he regretted it, Pete Rozelle, and that's one of the few things that he did wrong.
Yes. And it was particularly, I mean, I can't think of the author of it, but there's a history of the Cowboys I read a number of years ago, which talks about, because it happened in Dallas, and Dallas got such a bad reputation as a result of it, the Cowboys particularly hated that they had to play that Sunday, that they thought it was really just bad PR for their franchise, because, this intense focus on Dallas again for a football game, I mean, they really, Tex Schramm, Landry, all those guys really did not want to play a game that Sunday.
You're looking at two events that take place, and one commissioner doing it one way and another commissioner doing another. But what got me, and I didn't know this, is that the Giants had played a game that night before. It was Monday night or Sunday night or Monday night, one of the two. I can't remember the exact. Was it a Tuesday that took place?
It was a Tuesday, yep.
Okay, so it was Monday night. They got on a plane, flew back to New York, and I want to say the plane next to them as they taxied in was the plane that flew into the World Trade Center.
I didn't realize that. That's incredible. I had no idea.
Michael Strahan was talking about that in an interview, that they were right next to it. And he said that him and Jason Sehorn, when they were talking about should we play the game, he said, guys, you may see it on the news. We're looking across the bay and seeing the smoke rising up from the place where the two towers were. We're not going to play this game.
Yeah.
But, how did, in your opinion, how did football, specifically football, because that was really what was playing at the time, help a nation heal?
Well, I think one thing, I mean, this may be a little bit of a tangent, but one thing in the aftermath of that, once America gets involved in Afghanistan and then in Iraq again, I think the NFL did a fantastic job supporting veterans and the Wounded Warriors Project, that they made that a real hallmark of their public charity work. So in the aftermath of that, the league certainly embraces looking after soldiers. Not that they hadn't been involved with the USO and things before that. I mean, there was always the video feeds from the guys overseas. We're watching the Thanksgiving game, waving at our families. But by making a financial investment in organizations like the Wounded Warrior Project, I think the NFL created a very permanent connection between veterans of the armed service and then the NFL through that, in terms of their continuing commitment to that. Something that seems like all of the major professional sports leagues have done over time, but it seems most pronounced in the NFL to me, that relationship between veterans of particularly the more recent foreign conflicts and the league itself. In terms of the immediate aftermath of 9/11, I think it was very helpful simply to have games going again. I mean, I guess baseball got going a little more quickly than they did. I believe the first major public event right after 9/11 that was in any way like a sporting event was actually the WWE. Like 3 nights later, they did, I think they did I don't know, are you a wrestling fan or?
Back in the day when it was WWF.
Yeah, like SmackDown was like their
Yeah.
I think SmackDown was the first live public event after 9/11. And they were basically like, they're not going to scare us. We're going to have our event, and they had very intense security and stuff. But they had an event like on September 14th or 15th or something like that. I mean, it took the other leagues. I think it was prudent for the other leagues to wait, as you were describing. But I think certainly just having the games going again, even though there was enhanced security, and I think for many years, and I think in some ways, the intense security that still exists at a lot of sporting events is still a product of that.
Do you think that the security has kind of, I wouldn't say lapsed or been lax, but it's not as strict as it was in 2001?
No, certainly not. I mean, when one goes to the airport, obviously.
Oh, yeah,
but
absolutely.
at sporting events, for a couple of years, going to, there was a football game or a baseball game. I mean, it was pretty intense for a time, but it seems to me like it was probably necessary considering the circumstances, and fans persevered, and the game did as well. And the NFL has simply just gotten bigger and bigger and bigger over time, and I think become more central in the culture in some ways than it ever has, as things have become more fragmented, as people have cut the cables, as there's all these little pockets of interest that 500,000 people listen to this podcast, and 200,000 people watch this show, and 1 million people watch this other show. The NFL is really, I think, the last true part of, like the last true element of mass culture. There's 25, 30 million people watching NFL games, 50, 60 million people watching playoff games. There's nothing else in the culture really like that at the time, because people are kind of just watching everything at their own schedule. Even things that are really popular just don't have the centrality of interest that a live NFL game does. So I think in terms of serving as a cultural unifying force, there's almost nothing like the NFL that still exists.
Now that's so true. I want to say that hearing going through Joe Horrigan's book again, he said that the game that happened, they missed that week. The next game, the Giants went down to Kansas City, and they were passing hats to help the people who died during that, and they basically said, we're not Chiefs, we're not Giants, we're Americans. And I want to say that the Super Bowl that followed that was the Super Bowl that Bob Kraft said we're all patriots. Yeah,
the Rams Patriots, I believe. Yeah, and because you had the Paul McCartney and Bono or something. I think those were, and they had like
that.
The American.
That was. I always thought it was funny that we're getting Irish men to sing about American tragedy.
Yes, that was kind of strange. I agree.
But seeing the list come down from the sky like that. Oh, I mean,
it was very moving.
Yeah, if you weren't moved by that, you don't have a pulse.
Yeah.
Now I do have one other thing I want to talk to, and
if it was me, I would have had like the New York Police Department band or something, be like the halftime. Which is how I would have done it. But.
You have some good American rockers. You could have brought in Bruce Springsteen and Bon Jovi.
Tom Petty or whatever. Yeah.
Tom Petty. Yeah. I was about to say Dave Matthews, which is the greatest, but he is South African, so I don't think that would work.
He was born in South Africa?
He was.
Really, I'm very ignorant of his life, but
okay. See, you and I, we need to go back and start talking about things. But he, a couple of years ago, I got the chance to go to Charlottesville, Virginia, to see some of the areas. And my wife said, "What are we doing?" I'm like, "Well, we're looking at history. Dave Matthews played here," and she's like, "Oh."
I knew he was connected with UVA, but I didn't realize he was from South Africa originally.
Well, his parents were. Anyway.
Oh, interesting.
Long story short, but
I'm gonna go read the Wikipedia article after this.
You do that, and when you want to talk about good music, Under the Table and Dreaming, we'll talk.
Oh, it's a great record. Yeah, I like that record a lot. Yeah.
Oh, and I love that you called it a record, Clayton. You and man, we're separated from birth. You called it a record. It's awesome. It's awesome. We are. But I got one more thing for you. World War II.
Yes.
December 7th, 1941. Pearl Harbor, which took place, I want to say, at 7:00.
Yeah, it was early in the morning. Yeah.
Yeah, they were basically they weren't going to wake up. It's Sunday morning. There's no war. People are sleeping in, and the Japanese bomb Pearl Harbor. Well, you jump ahead a few hours in time zone. You go to the East Coast, and you have football being played. And if I remember correctly, people didn't know what was going on until the announcer said, "Would such and such major or such and such colonel please come to the come here.
Mm-hmm.
And you started getting people being called. I want to say at a Bills game, they might have been called in.
Well, what I read is I was actually rereading this book recently, John Eisenberg's The League. I don't know. Are you familiar with this book? It's if
No.
you
And then
he'd be a great guy to ask on your show. It's a fantastic book about basically it's about the NFL from Canton, Ohio in 1920 up until like 1950s. Essentially, it's about the early founders of the league, essentially. And he's got a bit in there about I think the Giants were playing in Washington.
that was what I was thinking. Yes.
And like there was like, will all armed service personnel report to their stations after the game, kind of thing. And guys started leaving because obviously you're in Washington. There's a lot of armed service people there, and people started leaving as a result of that. And I mean, it had that direct impact on the game. World War II had such a dramatic impact on the NFL too. I mean, it almost put several teams out of business. I mean, you had the combination Steagles with the Eagles and Steelers playing together. You had for 1 year, the pit cards with the Chicago Cardinals and Pittsburgh Steelers combining into one team. So the league was on very tough financial footing for a number of years during the war. But the league almost stopped playing in 1942. Some of the major figures in the league thought they should cool it for a couple of years. But Kennesaw Mountain Landis, the commissioner of baseball, wrote a letter to Franklin Roosevelt asking what he thought. And he basically said, keep playing. It's good for the morale of people on the home front. I believe it's called the Green Light Letter. And the NFL basically said, okay, if the baseball's playing, we're going to keep playing too. Their rosters were certainly depleted. Some teams had just a handful of guys who were legitimate pros on them for much of the war. But pro football found a way to persevere and actually drew fairly good crowds in a number of cities throughout the war.
Went Bronco Nagurski, didn't he come back and play?
Yes, Bronco Nagurski came back and played. You had guys like George Hallis, who was I think he was stationed in Kansas or something, who would if he was close enough, for like a 1-day train ride, would come back to work with the Bears. You had, the whole thing with the Steagles, with the combination of the Steelers and the Eagles, they played in Philadelphia, this team, for most of their games because you had so many guys who were in the Navy who were stationed at the Philadelphia Navy Yard there that it was an easy place that those guys could go do their duty and then play in the games on Sunday. You had this combined Steelers and Eagles roster. So the league made a lot of flexible accommodations, sort of like now in some respects, that made it possible for the league to continue to exist.
Do you think that if we just today, President Trump or President Biden, either one, says we just have to shut everything down, sports, everything else, how would you think that this country would react to that?
I sort of think the toothpaste is out of the tube on that at this point because there's been for I guess really 5 or 6 months now, there's been a way found to play professional sports. I think it'll be very tough to shut things down completely again. I think certain leagues may happen. I was actually kind of fearful of college basketball after, I got to be honest, I can't think of the guy's name from Florida, had the heart thing, who, when he, had that condition during the game. If that had got tied back to COVID, I had some concern that they were going to shut college basketball down as a result of that. It doesn't seem to have happened, but I think there will be some, until things are back to relatively normal, there will at least be some games being played between now and then.
So, but do you feel that if we didn't have sports, we were shut down in March, April, May, sort of in June, July, and on. If we didn't have baseball or basketball or football or racing, what would it be like?
I think it would be very tough for a lot of people psychologically. I know it certainly would for me. Having these sporting events to look forward to has certainly been helpful in my life. And many people I've spoken with, I think, are feeling the same way about it. For me, because football is my favorite sport, that's been the most central one. I remember sitting around in September watching a game saying, this is the most normal I've felt since March, just sitting around being mad about, the Jets, of course, losing. I didn't think about anything for 3 hours other than, what a bad defense Greg Williams had put on the field. I think having a sense of normalcy has been one of the great things about professional sports over the past few months. That at least it gives a semblance of that.
And we looked at, for specific, we could talk about several more, like Katrina.
Sure.
We talk about that, but Clayton, I appreciate your knowledge and your opinions, and I appreciate you coming on tonight.
Oh, it's been my genuine pleasure. I'm happy to anytime, and I love the podcast, and I look forward to coming on again sometime soon. It's been great fun talking with you.
And plug your book again, and plug your Twitter page.
Sure. On Twitter, you can follow me at ClaytonTrutor at Clayton Truder. I talk about a wide range of sports, a lot of sports history, Cincinnati athletics, which I cover for SB Nation. I write book reviews for a number of websites, and I publish those on Twitter as well. And I have a book coming out this fall with the University of Nebraska Press about the history of professional sports in Atlanta. It's mostly about the 1960s and 1970s. I'll be having a more formal details and announcement coming very soon regarding that. So please follow me, and I'll keep you all up to date on that. Thank you for your time.
Now tag me when you get that, and we'll have that out on my page too.
Fantastic, Jeremy. Thank you so much.
Clayton, thank you so much. And this is what football is all about, folks, is bringing people together. Thank you, Clayton.
Indeed. Have a nice evening.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
At the Sports History Network, we're all about sports yesteryear, and so we're so pleased to introduce you to Row One, an online memorabilia gallery and shop that brings your sports history to life anywhere. The Row One gallery includes over 5,200 gorgeously reproduced prints of team posters, game program covers, game tickets, advertisements, and more in baseball, pro and college football, pro and college basketball, and more. And any gallery item may be printed in a variety of sizes on wood, metal, canvas, acrylic, or poster paper. And in Row One shop, check out the thousands more of unique items with the retro and historical designs dating back to 1876, including t-shirts, long sleeve shirts, phone cases, mugs, blankets, pillows, towels, and even shower curtains. Go to sportshistorynetwork.com, ROW1, for access to the full Row One catalog and for gallery prints and gift items, plus get a 15% discount off all prints on the Row One Pictorium Gallery with coupon code SHN15. Follow the link on the show notes.